I never thought I'd come home from a 6-month deployment to find out my truck had been towed, sold, and crushed while I was serving overseas. But that's exactly what happened thanks to Patricia Morrison and her iron-fisted control over the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. The whole mess started 3 days before I was scheduled to fly out of Fort Bragg to Kuwait. I'm Jacob Riley, Staff Sergeant with the Army, and I'd been living in my modest 3-bedroom house in Meadowbrook Heights for about 2 years when I got my deployment orders. My 2019 Ford F-150 was my pride and joy, a midnight blue beast that I'd saved up for months to buy. The truck was paid off, well-maintained, and absolutely legal to park in my own driveway. I made sure of that before I left. I remembered filling out all the necessary paperwork with the HOA management company. I walked into their cramped office on a Tuesday afternoon, handed them my deployment orders, filled out the absentee homeowner form, and specifically noted that my truck would remain parked in my driveway for the duration of my deployment. The woman at the desk, some college kid named Jenny who barely looked up from her phone, stamped the forms and told me I was all set. I even asked her twice if there was anything else I needed to do. She said no. I should have known better than to trust a bored receptionist with something that important. My neighbor, an older guy named Frank who lived 3 houses down, agreed to keep an eye on the place. He'd mow the lawn every couple weeks, water the plants, collect my mail. Good guy, retired police officer, the kind of neighbor everyone wishes they had. Before I left, I gave him a key, my contact information, and we shook hands. He promised he'd call me if anything came up. I figured between Frank and the paperwork I'd filed, everything would be fine. I was wrong. Kuwait was hot, sandy, and busy. My unit was working 12-hour shifts, sometimes longer, and the days blurred together. I managed to video chat with my mom back in Ohio every couple weeks, texted with friends when I had the chance, but mostly I focused on the job. About 3 months into the deployment, I got an email from Frank. Short, confused, and concerning. Jacob, got a weird notice from the HOA about your truck. They're saying it's abandoned. I told them you're deployed, but they didn't seem to care. Call me when you can. I stared at my phone screen in the tiny break room, reading the message 3 times. Abandoned? I'd filed the paperwork. I'd done everything right. I tried calling Frank, but the time difference made it impossible to connect. I sent him an email asking for more details and tried not to worry about it. I had enough on my plate without adding HOA drama to the mix. 2 weeks later, Frank sent another email. This one was longer and angrier. Jacob, they towed your truck. I tried to stop them, but some woman named Patricia Morrison showed up with a towing company and had it hauled away. She said you never filed the proper paperwork and the truck was abandoned for over 60 days. I showed her the paperwork you filed, but she said it wasn't the right form. I don't know what else to do, man. I'm sorry. Call the HOA office immediately. My blood pressure spiked. I read the email 4 times, each time getting angrier. I immediately tried calling the HOA management office but got an answering machine. I left a message explaining that I was deployed, that I'd filed all necessary paperwork, and that they needed to return my truck immediately. I also sent an email to the general HOA inbox with the same information, attaching a copy of my deployment orders. No response. I called again the next day. Answering machine. I called every day for a week. Nothing. Finally, someone picked up. It was Jenny, the same receptionist from before. Meadowbrook Heights HOA. How can I help you? This is Staff Sergeant Jacob Riley. I'm deployed overseas and you people towed my truck from my driveway. I need to know where it is and how to get it back. There was a pause, some shuffling of papers. Let me check. What's your address? I gave her my address, spelling out every word slowly because I could tell she wasn't paying attention. More shuffling, the sound of typing, then another pause. Okay, so it looks like your vehicle was declared abandoned after being parked in the same location for over 60 days. It was towed to Miller's Towing and Storage. You'll need to pay the towing and storage fees to retrieve it. I filed paperwork before I left. I'm on a military deployment. You can't just tow someone's vehicle when they're serving overseas. I don't show any paperwork on file for you, sir, and the rules state that vehicles can't remain parked in one location for more than 60 days without prior approval. I got prior approval. I came into the office, filled out forms, had them stamped, Check your records again. More typing. A long pause. Then, I'm sorry, sir, but I don't see anything in the system. You'll need to contact Miller's Towing at this number. She rattled off a phone number so fast I barely caught it. Wait, let me talk to your supervisor. Let me talk to Patricia Morrison. Mrs. Morrison is the HOA president, not my supervisor. She's not available right now. You'll need to call back during board meeting hours. When are those? Third Thursday of every month from 6 to 8 p.m., I wanted to scream. I'm in Kuwait. I can't just call during specific hours. This is an emergency. My truck was illegally towed. I'm sorry, sir, but there's nothing I can do. You'll need to speak with the board. And she hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, hands shaking with rage. Around me, other soldiers were eating, watching movies, going about their business while my entire life was apparently falling apart back home. I tried calling Miller's Towing next. That conversation went even worse. The guy who answered spoke in a bored monotone. Yeah, we got a Ford F-150 Blue, towed from Meadowbrook Heights about 2 weeks ago. You're looking at $800 in towing fees plus $40 per day storage. $800? For what? Towing fee, processing fee, administrative fee. Says here it's an oversized vehicle, so that's extra. It's a standard pickup truck. Company policy. You want your truck, you pay the fees. Currently, you're at about $1,300 total. I'm deployed overseas with the military. I can't just show up with cash. Can't you hold it until I get back? Storage fees keep adding up. We hold vehicles for 90 days max, then they get sold or scrapped. You were towed 14 days ago, so you got 76 days left. After that, not our problem. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Can someone else pick it up for me? My neighbor? Sure, long as they got the fees in cash and a notarized letter from you authorizing release. Cash. Notarized letter. From Kuwait. Right. I called Frank next. He answered on the second ring, and I could hear the frustration in his voice the moment he said hello. Jacob, I've been trying to deal with this mess for 2 weeks. That Morrison woman is a piece of work. I showed her your paperwork, explained you're deployed, even cited the Service Member Civil Relief Act. She didn't care, said the paperwork you filed wasn't properly processed, and that's not her problem. Did you see her tow it? I heard the truck and came outside, saw the tow truck hooking up your F-15, and Morrison standing there with a clipboard like she was overseeing an execution. I argued with her for 20 minutes. She threatened to have me cited for harassment. I rubbed my temples. Frank, I don't know what to do. The towing company wants over $1,000 in cash and a notarized letter. I can't get anything notarized out here quickly. And even if I could, I can't ask you to pay that much. I'd pay it if they'd let me, but they won't release it without your authorization. I called a lawyer friend of mine. He said you need to contact your JAG office immediately. This is a military legal issue now. JAG, Judge Advocate General, military lawyers. I should have thought of that immediately. Thanks, Frank. I'll handle it from here. I appreciate everything you've tried to do. Just come home safe, kid. We'll get this sorted out. I hung up and immediately went to find my unit's legal assistance officer. Captain Hernandez was a sharp woman in her early 30s who'd been practicing military law for 6 years. I explained the situation in her cramped office the next morning, showed her all the emails, and watched her face get progressively darker as she read through everything. This is a clear violation of the Service Member Civil Relief Act, she said, pulling up documents on her computer. They can't take adverse action against your property while you're deployed, and they certainly can't ignore properly filed paperwork. Do you have copies of what you filed? I didn't keep copies. I didn't think I needed to. The receptionist stamped everything and filed it. That's going to be a problem, but not insurmountable. Let me make some calls. What's the name of the HOA president? Patricia Morrison. She wrote it down, along with the HOA management company name, the towing company, and every other detail I could remember. Give me 48 hours. Don't call them again. Don't engage with anyone from the HOA. Let me handle this through official channels. I felt a weight lift off my chest. Finally, someone who knew what they were doing and had the authority to make things happen. Captain Hernandez worked fast. 2 days later, she called me into her office with an update. I spoke with the HOA management company's legal counsel. They're claiming they have no record of your paperwork, which means either it was lost or never properly filed. Either way, they're liable. I also contacted Miller's Towing and informed them that selling or disposing of your vehicle while you're deployed would violate federal law. They're freezing all fees as of today. So I'll get my truck back? Her expression shifted. That's where we have a problem. I also spoke with Patricia Morrison directly. How'd that go? She hung up on me after I introduced myself. Then she called back an hour later and claimed she'd already sold your truck to recoup the HOA's administrative fees for dealing with an abandoned vehicle. My stomach dropped. She sold my truck? In 3 weeks? According to her, yes. She said the HOA bylaws give them authority to dispose of abandoned property after proper notification, which she claims was sent to your address. I was deployed. I wasn't getting mail. I know, that's the problem. She's claiming she followed proper procedure, sent certified letters, posted notices, the whole 9 yards. Without your original paperwork proving you filed for an exemption, this becomes a he said, she said situation. I felt sick. So what do? We escalate. I'm referring this to the regional JAG office. They have more resources and can pursue this more aggressively. In the meantime, I'm drafting a formal legal demand to the HOA and Patricia Morrison personally, demanding proof of their notification attempts and threatening legal action. I'm also filing a complaint with the Arizona Attorney General's Office and the Department of Defense's Legal Assistance Program. This woman is about to have more lawyers on her than she can handle. How long will all this take? Honestly, probably longer than your deployment, but we're going to make sure you're compensated and that this doesn't happen to another service member. I promise you that. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was something. I thanked her and went back to work, trying to focus on my job while my personal life crumbled 7,000 miles away. The next 6 weeks were torture. Captain Hernandez sent regular updates. The regional JAG office got involved and started digging into the HOA's records. They discovered that the HOA had a pattern of aggressive enforcement against service members. 3 other people in the neighborhood had complained about similar issues while deployed, though none as severe as having their vehicle sold. The Arizona Attorney General's office opened an investigation. Patricia Morrison hired her own lawyer and stopped responding to any communication. Frank kept me updated from the ground. Apparently, the neighborhood was splitting into 2 camps. Some people supported Morrison, claiming she was just enforcing the rules and keeping property values up. Others were furious, especially the other military families in the neighborhood. Someone started a Facebook group called Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Against HOA Abuse that grew to 200 members in a week. Then Frank sent me the email that made me see red. Jacob, I found out what happened to your truck. Patricia sold it to her nephew for $500. He drove it for 2 weeks, then totaled it racing on Desert Sky Boulevard. The truck's completely destroyed. I'm so sorry. I read that email sitting in the dining facility at 2 in the morning, unable to sleep. My truck, which I'd saved months to buy, which I'd maintained meticulously, which was supposed to be waiting for me when I got home, was gone. Not just sold, but destroyed. And Patricia Morrison had sold it to her own family member for a fraction of its value. I forwarded the email to Captain Hernandez. Her response came back within an hour. That's fraud. I'm escalating this immediately. Things moved quickly after that. The regional JAG office contacted the Phoenix Police Department and filed a formal complaint. Selling someone's property to a family member at below market value while claiming it was abandoned, especially when the owner was a deployed service member, constituted fraud and possibly theft. The police opened an investigation. Captain Hernandez also discovered something else. Patricia Morrison had never actually sent any certified letters to my address. The HOA's own records showed that notification had been posted on the property, which meant they'd supposedly taped a notice to my door. Frank confirmed he'd never seen any notices, and he walked past my house every day. Even if they had posted something, that didn't meet the legal requirements for disposing of someone's property, especially a deployed service member's property. The Arizona Attorney General's office expanded their investigation and subpoenaed all of the HOA's financial records. That's when things got really interesting. Turned out Patricia Morrison had been using HOA funds for personal expenses for over 2 years. The discovery process revealed unauthorized charges at restaurants, stores, even a vacation to Cancun, all paid for with HOA money. She'd hidden it well, but once lawyers started digging, the whole house of cards collapsed. I was scheduled to return stateside in late September. A week before my flight, Captain Hernandez called me into her office with a smile on her face. Good news. Patricia Morrison and the HOA management company have agreed to a settlement. They're offering you $30,000 for the value of your truck and damages. $30,000. My truck had been worth maybe $18,000 at most. Why so much? Because if this goes to trial, they're looking at criminal charges, civil liability, and a whole lot of bad press. The Attorney General's office found enough evidence to charge Morrison with fraud and embezzlement. She's trying to make this go away before she ends up in jail. The settlement includes an admission that they violated the Service Member Civil Relief Act, that they failed to follow proper procedures, and that they'll implement new policies to protect deployed service members. They're also firing Morrison from the HOA board and terminating their contract with the management company. What about criminal charges? That's up to the police and prosecutor. The settlement doesn't affect the criminal investigation. My guess is they'll charge her, but that's not our concern. Our concern is making you whole, and this settlement does that. I thought about it. $30,000 would more than replace my truck and compensate me for the stress and hassle, and knowing that Morrison was facing criminal charges satisfied my need for justice. I'll take it. Good. I'll have the paperwork ready for you to sign when you get back to Bragg. In the meantime, enjoy your last week of deployment knowing you won. I flew back to Fort Bragg on a rainy Thursday afternoon in late September. After processing through the usual post-deployment chaos, I had 3 days of leave before I had to report back. I drove a rental car back to Phoenix, taking the long drive through North Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas, Texas, New Mexico, and finally Arizona to clear my head and decompress. I pulled into Meadowbrook Heights on a Sunday morning. The neighborhood looked the same as when I'd left, neat rows of stucco houses with desert landscaping and tile roofs. Frank's house came into view first. He was outside watering his plants and broke into a huge smile when he saw me. We hugged like family, and he insisted I come inside for coffee. "You're a celebrity around here," he said, pouring me a cup in his kitchen. "Half the neighborhood wants to buy you a drink for taking down Morrison. The other half won't make eye contact." What happened to her? She resigned from the HOA board about 3 weeks ago. Rumors are the police are building a case, but nothing official yet. Her husband looks miserable every time I see him. Their nephew, the one who crashed your truck, got arrested for reckless driving and had to pay about $15,000 in fines and damages. Karma's a beautiful thing. I sipped the coffee, feeling a sense of closure starting to settle in. What about the HOA? They brought in a new management company and elected a new board, actually trying to be reasonable now. They passed a new policy specifically protecting deployed service members. No one can have their property touched while they're overseas without a court order. Should have been the rule all along, but sometimes people need to learn the hard way. We talked for another hour, catching up on everything I'd missed. Eventually, I drove the 3 houses down to my own place. The yard looked good, thanks to Frank's maintenance. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, just dustier. I walked through the rooms, reacquainting myself with my own home, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The next morning, I had a meeting scheduled with the JAG office at Luke Air Force Base, about an hour west of Phoenix. They'd coordinated with Fort Bragg to handle the final paperwork locally. Captain Hernandez had transferred to a new posting, but her replacement, a Major Scott, handled everything professionally. I signed the settlement documents, and he explained that the check would be processed within 30 days. "For what it's worth," Major Scott said as we finished up, "Captain Hernandez's work on your case has been used as a teaching example for other JAG officers. The way she escalated and coordinated with civilian authorities is textbook. You helped a lot of other service members even if you don't see it. That felt good. At least something positive came out of the whole mess. I spent the next 2 days truck shopping. With $30,000 coming, I could afford pretty much any truck I wanted." I ended up at a Ford dealership in Tempe, looking at the new 2024 F-150 models. The salesman, a guy named Rick in his 50s, was helpful without being pushy. When I explained why I was buying a new truck, he got quiet. "You're the guy from Meadowbrook Heights? The one that HOA messed with?" "Yeah, that's me." He shook his head. "My son's in the Navy. Deployed right now, actually. What happened to you made me sick. I'm glad you fought back." Rick spent the next 3 hours helping me spec out the perfect truck. Midnight blue, just like my old one, but with upgraded everything. 4-wheel drive, towing package, premium sound system, the works. The price came to just under $35,000, but Rick worked with his manager and got it down to $28,000. When I mentioned I was paying cash as soon as the settlement check cleared, they held the truck for me and gave me a loaner in the meantime. I drove that loaner back to Meadowbrook Heights feeling better than I had in months. My house, my neighborhood, my life, all still here, still mine, despite Patricia Morrison's best efforts to make me miserable. That evening, I decided to walk around the neighborhood. I needed the exercise after months of deployment and wanted to see what had changed. Most people I passed waved or said hello. A few stopped to chat, thanking me for standing up to the HOA or sharing their own horror stories about Morrison. One woman, maybe in her 40s, approached me near the community park. "You're Jacob Riley, right? I'm Sandra. I live on Cottonwood Lane." "Nice to meet you." "I wanted to thank you. My husband's deployed right now, Air Force, and I was terrified after what happened to you. The new policies the HOA put in place make me feel a lot better. So thank you for fighting." We talked for a few minutes about her husband's deployment, and I gave her my number in case she needed anything. It felt strange being on the other side of deployment, being the one offering support instead of needing it. As I walked back toward my house, I noticed a for sale sign in front of a large corner lot property. I didn't need to check the address to know whose house it was. Patricia Morrison was moving. Frank confirmed it that night over beers on his back patio. She and her husband are moving to Tucson, trying to get out before the criminal charges are filed, probably. The neighborhood's betting pool has the arrest happening within a month. "You guys have a betting pool?" "Hey, we've got to entertain ourselves somehow. My money's on 3 weeks." Frank won the pool. Exactly 19 days after I got back to Phoenix, I was having breakfast when my phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "Police just arrested Morrison. She's being taken out in handcuffs. Half the neighborhood's outside watching." I didn't go watch. I didn't need to see it. The satisfaction of knowing justice was being served was enough. The local news covered the arrest that evening. Patricia Morrison, 52, former HOA president of Meadowbrook Heights, arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and theft. The news reporter stood in front of the neighborhood entrance, explaining how Morrison had sold a deployed soldier's truck to her nephew and embezzled over $40,000 from the HOA over 2 years. They showed her being led to a police car, looking smaller and more defeated than I'd imagined. Her lawyer released a statement saying they'd fight the charges, but everyone knew it was over. The settlement check arrived 4 days later. I deposited it, paid off the Ford dealership, and drove my new truck home on a Wednesday afternoon. It felt good, really good, to have a vehicle again. That evening, Frank came over and we christened the new truck by loading up some old furniture he needed to take to the dump. Simple, mundane, exactly what I needed. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a routine. I reported back to Fort Bragg and resumed my duties. The Army kept me busy, which was fine. I didn't want too much time to think about everything that had happened. But I kept in touch with Frank, who kept me updated on the Morrison situation. The criminal case moved forward quickly. With the evidence the Attorney General's office had gathered, Morrison's lawyer advised her to take a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to 3 counts of fraud and 1 count of embezzlement. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in jail, 5 years probation, and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA and to me. She'd also never be allowed to serve on an HOA board again, which seemed like the most appropriate punishment of all. The HOA management company that had been working with Morrison also faced consequences. The Arizona Attorney General filed a civil suit against them for failing to properly maintain records and allowing Morrison's abuse to continue unchecked. They settled out of court, paying a fine and agreeing to implement new oversight procedures. The new HOA board in Meadowbrook Heights was nothing like the old one. They held open meetings, actually listened to homeowners, and focused on maintaining the neighborhood instead of harassing residents. The new president, a retired teacher named Margaret, reached out to me personally to apologize for what had happened and to assure me it would never happen again. I appreciated the gesture. Life moved on. I got promoted to sergeant first class that spring. I started dating a woman named Claire, who worked as a nurse at the VA hospital. Frank became like an uncle to me, always there when I needed advice or just someone to talk to. My mom visited from Ohio and loved seeing my new truck and house, but the case left its mark on more than just me. The Arizona legislature took notice of what had happened and introduced a bill specifically protecting deployed military members from HOA actions. It passed unanimously and was signed into law that summer. The bill required HOAs to maintain a registry of deployed service members, prohibited any adverse action against their property during deployment, and imposed severe penalties for violations. It was nicknamed Riley's Law in the press, which felt surreal. I was invited to the signing ceremony at the state capitol in Phoenix. I took leave and attended, standing behind the governor as she signed the bill into law. Reporters asked me questions afterward, and I kept my answers simple. I hoped this would prevent other service members from going through what I did. That was all that mattered. Frank drove up for the ceremony, and we celebrated afterward at a steakhouse in downtown Phoenix. Over dinner, he told me something I hadn't known. I was keeping this quiet, but I testified in Morrison's sentencing hearing. Told the judge about watching her tow your truck, about how she threatened me when I tried to intervene. I wanted to make sure she faced real consequences. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, I did. What she did was wrong, and somebody needed to say it officially. Besides, it felt good. I spent 30 years as a cop watching bad people get away with things because nobody wanted to get involved. I'm retired now. I can get involved. We clinked beer bottles and enjoyed our steaks. Life was good. The following year brought more changes. The Meadowbrook Heights HOA hired a professional management firm that actually knew what they were doing. Dues went down. Services improved. People started enjoying living there again instead of living in fear of arbitrary enforcement actions. Patricia Morrison served 14 months of her 18-month sentence and was released on good behavior. She moved out of state, and I never heard about her again. Her nephew paid restitution for destroying my original truck, though I never saw a dime of that money. It went into some victim's fund or something. I didn't care. I had my new truck and my life back. Claire and I got serious. We moved in together after about a year of dating, and she loved the house in Meadowbrook Heights. She got along great with Frank, who treated her like a daughter. We talked about marriage, about kids, about building a life together. All the things that seemed impossible during deployment suddenly felt not just possible, but inevitable. I stayed in the Army and deployed twice more over the next few years. Each time I filed proper paperwork with the HOA, and each time everything went smoothly. The new management company went out of their way to accommodate deployed service members, probably because they didn't want another legal nightmare like what happened with Morrison. Frank kept an eye on the house during those deployments, just like before. But this time, there was never any drama. No towing, no harassment, just a quiet house waiting for me to come home. Looking back on the whole experience, I learned a lot. I learned that paperwork matters even when you think you've done everything right. I learned that some people abuse whatever tiny bit of power they're given. I learned that the military takes care of its own, and that organizations like JAG exist for exactly these situations. Most importantly, I learned that standing up for yourself matters even when it's hard, even when you're thousands of miles away and feel helpless. The last time I drove past Patricia Morrison's old house, a young family had moved in. I saw kids playing in the yard, a dog running around, normal, happy life stuff. That's what neighborhoods should be about. Not petty enforcement actions and power trips, but people living their lives and taking care of each other. Frank and I still have beers on his patio regularly. He's in his 70s now, slowing down a bit but still sharp as ever. He tells stories about his police days, and I tell stories about the Army. We're family now, not just neighbors. The settlement money I got went toward a lot of things. The truck, obviously, but also into savings, into home improvements, into building a stable life. Every time I drive that midnight blue F-15, I think about the journey it represents. Not just the vehicle, but everything it took to get it. The deployment, the legal battle, the stress, and ultimately the victory. Claire and I got married 2 years after we met. Small ceremony, close friends and family. Exactly what we wanted. Frank walked her down the aisle because her own father had passed years before. We honeymooned in Colorado, driving there in my truck, camping and hiking and enjoying life. The Army eventually stationed me at Fort Huachuca in southern Arizona, which meant I didn't have to leave Meadowbrook Heights. Claire kept her job at the VA. We settled into our life, talking about starting a family, enjoying the peace we'd built together. The new HOA board asked me to join as a member a few years after the Morrison incident. I declined politely. I'd had enough of HOA politics to last a lifetime. But I appreciated that they asked, and I appreciated even more that they respected my decision without any hard feelings. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't fought back, if I'd just accepted the loss of my truck and moved on. Morrison would still be running the HOA like her personal fiefdom. Other service members would still be getting harassed. The laws wouldn't have changed. Sometimes one person standing up makes all the difference. I also think about Jenny, that receptionist who failed to properly file my paperwork. She wasn't malicious, just careless. But her carelessness cost me months of stress and nearly cost me my truck permanently. It's a reminder that every job matters, every task matters, even the boring administrative stuff that seems meaningless at the time. The final piece of closure came about 5 years after the initial incident. I got a letter from the Arizona Attorney General's office informing me that the investigation into HOA abuses in the state had led to sweeping reforms. Over 20 HOAs had been sanctioned or placed under state oversight for similar abuses. Dozens of board members had been removed. New training requirements were implemented. My case, they said, had been the catalyst for all of it. That felt good. Really good. Not just because of personal vindication, but because I knew other people wouldn't suffer what I'd suffered. Other deployed service members could focus on their missions instead of worrying about their property back home. That was worth everything. Frank retired from his part-time job as a security consultant around that time and started spending his days woodworking in his garage. He made Claire and me a beautiful dining table as a wedding gift, hand-carved and finished with care. We use it every day, and every time I sit at it, I think about the friendship that started with him trying to protect my truck while I was overseas. My mother visited again and met Claire for the first time. They got along wonderfully, and Mom pulled me aside before she left. "You've built a good life here, Jacob. I'm proud of you, not just for your military service, but for standing up when things went wrong. Your father would be proud too." Dad had passed when I was in high school, and I rarely talked about him. But hearing that he'd be proud meant everything. The neighborhood continued to thrive under proper management. Property values went up. People actually wanted to live there, which hadn't always been the case under Morrison's reign. The community pool got renovated. The common areas were maintained beautifully. It became the kind of place you were happy to call home. I made Sergeant Major eventually, the culmination of years of hard work and dedication. The promotion ceremony was held at Fort Huachuca with Claire and Frank in attendance. Afterward, we celebrated at the same steakhouse in Phoenix where Frank and I had celebrated the law signing years before. Full circle. Claire and I had our first child, a daughter, 3 months later. We named her Jennifer after my grandmother, but called her Jenny. The irony of the name wasn't lost on me given the receptionist who'd started this whole mess, but Claire liked it and so did I. Baby Jenny was perfect. And Frank became the honorary grandfather, spoiling her rotten from day one. Life became about family, career, and community. The Morrison incident faded into the background, a story I'd tell occasionally when the topic came up, but not something I dwelled on. I'd won. Justice had been served. Laws had been changed. That was enough. But the lessons stuck with me. I became an advocate for military legal assistance, speaking at briefings for deploying soldiers about their rights and the resources available to them. I told my story dozens of times, always emphasizing the importance of documentation and not being afraid to fight back when wronged. One young private came up to me after a briefing and told me his own HOA was giving him trouble before his deployment. I connected him with JAG immediately, and they sorted it out before he left. He deployed with peace of mind, and his property was protected. That's what it was all about. Frank's health started declining when he hit 75. Nothing serious, just the normal wear and tear of age. Claire, being a nurse, checked on him regularly and made sure he was taking his medications. He grumbled about being fussed over, but we could tell he appreciated it. We'd have dinner together once a week, rotating between our houses. Frank loved holding baby Jenny, telling her stories about her daddy and the infamous truck incident. She was too young to understand, but she'd giggle at his animated expressions. "You know," Frank said one evening while holding Jenny, "this whole thing worked out pretty perfectly. You got justice, the laws got changed, and I got an extended family out of it. Patricia Morrison did us all a favor by being such a nightmare." Claire laughed. "That's one way to look at it. It's the right way to look at it. Bad things happen, but good people make good things come from them. Jacob could have rolled over and accepted losing his truck. Instead, he fought back and changed the system. That's the kind of man I'm proud to know." I felt my throat tighten. Frank had become the father figure I'd lost years ago, and hearing him say that meant the world. The years kept rolling by. Jenny grew into a happy, energetic toddler. I got orders for another deployment, but this time everything went smoothly with the HOA. Claire and Jenny stayed in the house. Frank checked on them daily. The management company even sent me a care package overseas with a note thanking me for my service and assuring me my property was protected. That deployment was easier mentally, knowing everything back home was secure. I could focus on the mission without worrying about HOA drama. It's what every service member deserves, and thanks to the changes that came from my case, more people had that peace of mind. When I returned from that deployment, Jenny was walking and talking. She ran to me at the airport yelling, "Daddy!" and I scooped her up, feeling complete. Claire hugged us both, and Frank was right behind her, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. We drove home in my truck, Jenny in her car seat babbling about everything she wanted to show me. Life was perfect in that moment, exactly as it should be. The Meadowbrook Heights. Ooh. HOA continued to function smoothly. The board members were reasonable people who actually cared about the community. Meetings were well attended and productive. The neighborhood thrived. It was everything an HOA should be and so rarely is. I saw the new family living in Morrison's old house occasionally. They were nice people, completely unaware of the drama that had unfolded in that home years before. Their kids played with other neighborhood kids. They waved when I drove by. Normal, healthy suburban life. Sometimes Claire and I would sit on our back patio in the evenings after Jenny went to bed, and we'd talk about everything we'd been through. The deployment, the truck incident, the legal battle, the changes that came from it. It all seemed surreal in retrospect, like something that happened to someone else. "Do you ever regret buying here?" Claire asked one night. "With all the HOA drama?" I thought about it. No, if I'd bought somewhere else, I never would have met Frank. The laws wouldn't have changed. Other service members would still be getting screwed. Everything happened for a reason. "That's very philosophical of you, Sergeant Major Riley." I pulled her close. "I have my moments." Frank passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks before his 80th birthday. It was sudden, but not unexpected, given his age and health issues. Claire found him when he didn't answer his door for their weekly check-in. The funeral was huge, hundreds of people from his police days in the neighborhood. I gave the eulogy, talking about his loyalty, his friendship, and his unwavering integrity. I broke down twice, but got through it. We buried him at the National Memorial Cemetery in Phoenix with full honors. The police department sent a color guard. Taps played as they folded the flag. It was beautiful and heartbreaking. His will left me his house and everything in it. I hadn't known, and it floored me. His kids had passed years before, and he had no other close family. The house, the furniture, the truck he'd driven, all of it came to Claire and me. We debated what to do with it. Selling felt wrong. Renting it out felt wrong. Eventually, we decided to keep it as a guest house for when family visited, and as a reminder of the man who'd become family to us. Jenny grew up hearing stories about Grandpa Frank, even though they had only overlapped for a few years. We made sure she knew what kind of man he was, and how he'd stood up for her daddy when it mattered. She kept a picture of him holding her as a baby on her dresser. The Morrison case occasionally came up in the news when reporters did anniversary pieces or when similar cases arose in other states. I declined most interview requests, but did a few when I thought it might help other service members understand their rights. The attention was never comfortable, but it served a purpose. Arizona's Riley's Law became a model for other states. Within 5 years, over 30 states had passed similar legislation protecting deployed service members from HOA actions. The Department of Defense cited it as an example of effective state-level support for military families. That made me prouder than any medal or promotion. I retired from the Army after 22 years of service. The ceremony was emotional, surrounded by Claire, Jenny, and dozens of soldiers I'd served with over the years. I'd given the Army more than 2 decades of my life, and it had given me purpose, discipline, and a sense of accomplishment. But I was ready for the next chapter. Claire and I started a small business consulting with HOAs on military family issues. We helped draft policies, trained board members, and provided resources for deployed service members. It combined everything I'd learned from my own experience with Claire's organizational skills and compassion. The business grew steadily, helping communities across Arizona and eventually nationwide. Jenny grew into a smart, thoughtful teenager who wanted to join the military like her dad. I had mixed feelings about that, but supported her completely. She had the grades and the drive to do whatever she wanted with her life. The house in Meadowbrook Heights remained our home base through everything. We renovated it over the years, updating the kitchen and bathrooms, adding an office for the business. The midnight blue F-15 eventually got traded in for a newer model, but I kept the same color scheme. Some things are worth maintaining. Looking back on everything, from that initial deployment to the truck being towed to the legal battle to the laws being changed to Frank's friendship to Claire and Jenny and the life we built, it all connects. One incident, one injustice led to so much growth and change. Patricia Morrison probably never thought about the consequences when she had my truck towed. She was just exercising her petty authority, not considering the human cost. But her actions set in motion events that changed laws, protected countless service members, and ultimately led to her own downfall. There's poetry in that. I sometimes wonder if she ever reflected on what she'd done, if she ever regretted it. Probably not. People like that rarely do. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that good came from bad, that justice was served, and that the system changed to prevent future injustice. The Meadowbrook Heights neighborhood became a place I was proud to live. The HOA functioned properly. Neighbors looked out for each other. Kids played safely. Property values remained stable. It was everything a community should be, achieved through proper management and respect for residents. Our consulting business thrived because there was genuine need for what we offered. Too many HOAs operated like Morrison had, abusing their authority and making residents miserable. We helped change that culture, one neighborhood at a time. It was satisfying work that made a real difference. Jenny got her appointment to West Point and left for New York with tears and excitement. Claire and I drove her there, helped her move into the barracks, and said goodbye to our little girl who wasn't so little anymore. She was following in my footsteps, and I couldn't have been prouder. The years kept passing. More deployments came for Jenny, and Claire and I found ourselves on the other side of the experience, worrying about our deployed daughter instead of being deployed ourselves. It gave me new perspective on what my mom must have gone through during my deployments. We made sure Jenny knew about all the legal protections available to her. She laughed and said she'd memorized Riley's Law before she even joined the Army. It was required reading at West Point now, part of their training on legal rights and resources. Frank's house remained our guest house, preserved as a memorial to the friendship that had meant so much. Sometimes I'd sit in his old workshop, surrounded by his tools and unfinished projects, and talk to him like he was still there. It brought me peace. Claire and I celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary with a trip back to Colorado, retracing the route of our honeymoon. We camped in the same spots, hiked the same trails, and marveled at how fast time had flown. 20 years since we'd met, all because I'd come home from a deployment to find my truck towed and needed someone to talk to at the VA hospital where she worked. Everything connects. Every experience shapes what comes next. The Morrison incident could have broken me, could have left me bitter and angry. Instead, it led to positive change, to friendship, to love, to purpose. That's the choice we all have. When bad things happen, let them destroy us or use them to build something better. The midnight blue truck I drive now is the fourth one I've owned since that original F-15 got destroyed. Same color, same make, a rolling memorial to where it all started. People sometimes ask why I'm so loyal to that particular truck color and model. The answer is simple. It reminds me that material things can be replaced, but integrity and justice are forever. Meadowbrook Heights celebrated its 50th anniversary as a neighborhood last year. The HOA threw a big party at the community center with food, music, and games. The current board president gave a speech mentioning the neighborhood's history, including the difficult period under previous management. Everyone knew what that meant. Some things become legend. I was asked to say a few words and kept it brief. I thanked the community for supporting me during the legal battle, thanked Frank posthumously for his friendship and loyalty, and expressed hope that Meadowbrook Heights would continue to be a place where people looked out for each other and treated everyone with respect. The applause was genuine and warm. Claire and I danced that night under strings of lights in the warm Arizona evening, surrounded by neighbors who'd become friends. Jenny sent a video message from her deployment saying she was proud of her old man and couldn't wait to come home. Life had come full circle, and it was beautiful. The legal reforms that came from my case continued to evolve. New protections were added for military families. HOA oversight increased nationwide. The Department of Defense made military legal assistance more accessible. Thousands of service members benefited from changes that started with one towed truck and one staff sergeant who refused to accept injustice. That's my legacy. Beyond military service, beyond the family I've built, beyond the business Claire and I run. I changed a system that needed changing, and I did it by simply standing up for what was right and refusing to back down. Patricia Morrison is a footnote now, a cautionary tale about the abuse of power. Her name comes up in legal training as an example of what not to do. She spent months in jail, years on probation, and will be remembered as someone who let petty authority corrupt her judgment. That's her legacy. Meanwhile, my truck sits in the driveway of my home in a neighborhood I love, surrounded by people I care about, living a life built on the foundation of standing up for principle. That's my legacy, and I'll take it any day. The sun sets over the Sonoran Desert tonight like it does every night, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Claire is inside making dinner. Jenny is serving her country somewhere overseas. Frank rests in eternal peace at the cemetery. And I sit on my patio, cold beer in hand, reflecting on a journey that started with injustice and ended with purpose. Life is good. The truck is parked safely in my driveway. The HOA functions properly. The laws protect those who serve. Justice was served. And somewhere, maybe, Patricia Morrison thinks about the staff sergeant whose truck she towed and wonders if it was worth it. I hope she does. I hope she learned something. But either way, the world moved on without her, better and stronger for her absence. That's how it should be. Bad people get removed, good systems get built, life continues, and one midnight blue F-150 truck remains a symbol of why standing up for what's right always matters, no matter how hard the fight.